It was Christmas Eve, and I was 16 years old. The snow was falling heavily outside, blanketing the world in white. My parents and I were cozy in the living room, the warm glow of the Christmas tree lights flickering gently as we shared eggnog and opened stockings, a tradition we cherished. The quiet evening was suddenly interrupted by a loud, deliberate knock at the door. 3 sharp bangs. My father and I exchanged a confused glance before he got up to investigate. He peeked out the window first. No one was there. But the knocks were so loud, so purposeful. We were certain someone had to be standing outside. Dad opened the door, and we all froze. Lying on the snow-covered threshold was a black cat, its fur matted with blood. The snow around it was pristine. No footprints, no tire tracks, no sign of anyone who could have placed it there. It was as if the cat had appeared out of thin air. At first, we didn't know what to do. The cat's sides were heaving. It was still alive. Despite the eeriness of the situation, there was no question about what had to happen. My family had always been animal lovers. We wrapped the cat in an old blanket, brought him inside, and made a little bed for him in the laundry room. He was a young male, not neutered, and it was clear he'd been in a terrible fight. Over the next few days, we nursed him as best as we could before taking him to the vet. Against all odds, he made a full recovery. We named him Shadow at first, fitting for a sleek black cat with an almost supernatural arrival. But this wasn't the end of his story. A few weeks later, my mom gave Shadow to our neighbors down the street. They adored him, and soon he became a beloved part of their family. He seemed to settle into his new life effortlessly. About 4 months passed, and nothing strange happened. Then, one night, Shadow woke them up in a frenzy. He was howling, yowling, and pawing at their bedroom door like his life depended on it. At first, they tried to calm him down, but he wouldn't stop. The noise was relentless. Eventually, they got up to check on him, and that's when they smelled the smoke. Rushing downstairs, they found the garage ablaze. The fire had already consumed part of the structure, and one of the cars inside was catching fire too. They acted quickly, calling the fire department and getting everyone out safely. When the firefighters arrived, they managed to stop the fire before it spread to the house. The garage was badly damaged, but no one was hurt. The firefighters later said it was a miracle the fire didn't escalate further. There were propane tanks, paint cans, and all kinds of flammable materials in the garage. After that, Shadow got a new name, Clark, after Superman. He'd saved the family that night, and they never forgot it. Clark lived a long, happy life with them, becoming a true hero in every sense of the word. To this day, though, I can't explain how he appeared on our doorstep that snowy Christmas Eve, or how he seemed to know exactly when danger was coming. It was the winter of 1987, a Christmas season that would become etched in the memory of the Taylor family forever. What started as a routine holiday road trip turned into a roller coaster of missteps, a frantic search, and a reunion that could have been pulled straight out of a movie. But before we get to that, let me introduce you to the Taylors. Megan and Daniel Taylor were your classic couple next door. They had 2 kids, Luke, 13, a curious adventurer, and Ethan, 9, a budding artist. The Taylors were driving cross-country from Phoenix, Arizona to Springfield, Missouri, to spend Christmas with Megan's parents. Everything was meticulously planned: snacks, blankets, and even a cassette playlist of holiday tunes. They were ready, or so they thought. It was December 21st when the family packed their Chevy van and hit the road at dawn. Spirits were high as the kids sang along to Jingle Bells. The plan was simple: cover as many miles as possible each day, make quick stops, and arrive in Springfield on Christmas Eve. The first leg of the trip went smoothly. By the time they reached Albuquerque, New Mexico, they were a little tired but still on track. But you know how road trips go? Things never stay perfect for long. The trouble started just outside Amarillo, Texas, where an unexpected storm rolled in. Freezing rain slicked the roads, forcing the Taylors to slow down. As they crawled along the highway, Daniel muttered, "We're losing time." By nightfall, the weather had worsened, and they were hours behind schedule. To make up for lost time, Daniel decided they'd alternate driving through the night. Megan took the first shift, while Daniel and the boys drifted off in the back. She navigated the icy roads with caution until they reached a rest area near Wichita, Kansas. She decided to take a quick break. Megan quietly exited the van, thinking Daniel was awake. What she didn't know was that he had only stirred briefly and fallen back asleep. 10 minutes later, Daniel woke up, groggy but determined to get back on the road. Not noticing Megan was gone, he started the van and pulled back onto the highway. Megan stepped out of the restroom to find nothing. Her family, the van, everything gone. She stood there, barefoot and coatless, clutching her purse in disbelief. At first, she thought it was a prank, but as the minutes ticked by, panic set in. Megan approached a truck driver parked nearby, frantically explaining her situation. He tried using his CB radio to contact Daniel, but there was no response. The trucker advised her to wait inside the rest area building, where it was warm. Megan reluctantly agreed, but every second felt like an eternity. She borrowed the trucker's phone to call the highway patrol. Explaining where she was proved to be a challenge. She barely knew their route, and the snowy roads blurred everything. Finally, the dispatcher pieced it together. Megan was near Wichita, and the van was likely somewhere east on Interstate 70. Meanwhile, Daniel drove for nearly 3 hours before Luke's voice broke the silence. "Mom's been quiet," he said. Daniel glanced in the rearview mirror and said, "She's probably sleeping under the blanket." Luke leaned over to check and froze. "Dad, Mom's not here." The van screeched to a halt on the shoulder. Daniel's heart raced as he pieced it together. "She must have gotten out at the rest stop," he whispered, horrified. He grabbed the first payphone he could find and called the highway patrol. By the time Megan and Daniel connected through the dispatcher, they were 150 miles apart. Driving back wasn't feasible, and the roads were still treacherous. The dispatcher suggested Megan take the earliest flight from Wichita to Springfield. But as Megan rushed to the airport, a thick fog settled over the region, grounding flights for hours. Exhausted, stranded, and desperate, Megan refused to give up. She called her parents, who began driving toward her, but they were still hours away. Finally, a small commuter plane was cleared for takeoff. Megan boarded the shaky flight with nothing but her purse and a hope that she'd reach her family before Christmas Eve. When she landed in Springfield just after midnight, she was greeted by Daniel and the boys waiting at the terminal with teary eyes and open arms. Ethan handed her a hastily drawn card that read, "Best Christmas ever." That Christmas morning, as they sat around the fireplace at Megan's parents' home, they couldn't stop laughing about the chaos of the past 2 days. Megan held up her coffee mug and said, "I'll never look at rest areas the same way again." Sometimes, the best holiday stories aren't about perfect plans. They're about the imperfect, unexpected moments that remind us how much we mean to each other. And for the Taylors, it became a tale they'd retell every Christmas, forever grateful for the wild journey that brought them closer together. This story takes place 4 years ago, and it still haunts me to this day. It was Christmas night, and my family was driving home from a fancy restaurant. I, unlike the rest of my family, wasn't tired, so that 45-minute drive felt like an eternity. On top of that, my little sister wouldn't stop moaning about how her friend hadn't gotten her anything for Christmas. About 20 minutes into the drive, my dad pulled into a gas station to grab some cigarettes. My sister, brother, and mom all got out to use the restroom. I stayed in the car since I'd already gone before we left. Once they were gone, I decided to play a few games on my phone. I glanced at the car clock and saw that 10 minutes had passed. I started to wonder what was taking them so long. That's when I peered out the window and saw a man staring at our car. It startled me. I had no idea how long he had been watching. What made it even more unnerving was that he had a blank, expressionless face. It was hard to make out any details since it was dark, and he was standing in the shadows, away from the station lights. He looked to be about 5'9" and middle-aged. When he noticed me looking at him, he started walking toward the car. And I'd be lying if I said I wasn't scared. Just then, my dad came back with the rest of the family. He apologized, saying he had been arguing with the cashier. I didn't care what he said. I was just relieved that he was there. I took another glance out the window, and the man was still staring, but now he had an annoyed look on his face. We drove off, but for the rest of the ride, I couldn't get that man out of my mind. That wouldn't have been too bad if it had ended there, but it didn't. Later that night, while everyone else was asleep, I was watching YouTube, and a storm was raging outside. I love storms. They make me feel cozy as I lay in bed. I set my phone down and just listened to the sounds of the rain and wind. That peaceful moment didn't last long. Suddenly, I heard something smash into the window behind me. I lurched forward, almost falling out of bed. I thought maybe a bird had crashed into the window. I pulled the blinds apart, and what I saw next made my heart stop. There was a man standing outside by my parents' cars, looking directly up at my window. I squinted to get a better look, and it was him, the same man I had seen at the gas station. Only this time, when our eyes met, he grinned. I didn't think twice. I screamed at the top of my lungs, and my dad came rushing down the stairs and into my room. "Why the hell are you screaming?" he asked, his voice full of concern and frustration. I explained everything, every detail of what had happened. Without hesitation, my dad grabbed a baseball bat and told me to call the police. Within 10 minutes, they arrived and found the man hiding in our shed. He was arrested, and that was the last time I ever saw him. The next day, my dad inspected the house and found that the handle on our back door had been damaged. It wasn't completely broken, but it was definitely tampered with. That thought gives me an eerie feeling. What if he had managed to get inside? He could have hurt us, or worse. The memory still sends shivers down my spine. My name is Casey, and this happened on Christmas morning of 2012. It's been about 12 years, so I can't remember every detail perfectly, but I'll do my best to tell you what happened. Ever since I was young, I had lived with my aunt and uncle, Lily and Ben, throughout my childhood. Long story short, my mom struggled with serious substance abuse, and my dad was in prison for a long time because of it. They were in no position to raise a child, so I ended up with my extended family. It was hard at first, but over time, I found a sense of stability and happiness with Aunt Lily and Uncle Ben. They cared about me in a way that no one else ever had. So, it was Christmas morning, and I, being the excited 6-year-old I was, woke up early and ran out to the living room. Under the tree were piles of presents and gifts, every child's dream come true. My heart was racing as I quickly sprinted to Aunt Lily and Uncle Ben's room to wake them up. "Santa came! Santa came!" I shouted, my voice bright with excitement. They groaned, half asleep, but still managed to get up and join me. Even though they were tired, I could tell they wanted to share in the Christmas magic with me. We spent the next hour tearing through the wrapping paper, laughter echoing through the house as I tore into each gift. It was a moment of pure joy. After the chaos of opening presents, I grabbed the trash bag and began cleaning up. As I was holding it open, a strange glint caught my eye. It was a flash of movement from the corner of the living room by the stairs. I blinked and squinted. Was I imagining it? Before I could process what I saw, 2 pairs of shoes appeared at the top of the stairs. My heart stopped. I dropped the trash bag without a second thought and rushed toward the stairs. I looked up, wide-eyed, and pointed. "Santa," I whispered. Aunt Lily's eyes went from the stairs to me and then back again. A look of confusion twisted her features, but then she gasped. Her eyes widened as she took in the figure in the shadows, half hidden behind the doorway of the guest room. "Ben!" she screamed, voice trembling. "Call the police!" I didn't understand what was happening, but I felt the fear in the air as it settled like a heavy fog. I started crying as the adrenaline coursed through me, the reality of the situation sinking in. Whoever was up there wasn't moving, just staying still. Our neighborhood wasn't far from the police station, and they arrived quickly, their sirens wailing in the distance. But by the time they got to our house, the figure was gone. They found no trace of who it might have been, and couldn't figure out how they'd gotten in. The doors were always locked, and we had a dog who should have barked if a stranger had entered. But he hadn't made a sound. Aunt Lily and Uncle Ben were shaken. They believed the intruder had to be someone familiar to us, someone who knew how to get inside without being detected. 2 weeks later, Uncle Ben went upstairs to fix a pipe that had been leaking. What he found made his blood run cold. In one of the closets were several kitchen knives, haphazardly stabbed into the wall, along with torn food wrappers and a sleeping bag. It was unsettling. The sleeping bag had been mine from when I was younger. Whoever had been in our house had been there for a while. They'd been eating our food, hiding in our guest room, and no one had known. After that, the fear didn't leave us. And even though Aunt Lily and Uncle Ben were convinced that it was someone we knew, I still wondered if it was a squatter, someone desperate for shelter. It made sense why they'd been there for so long and why they hadn't left. And that was Christmas morning of 2012, a story I'll always remember. Fast forward to a different story, one that still haunts me to this day. My name is Emma, and I was in my 30s when this happened on Christmas Eve last year. My boyfriend Marcus and I had recently split up due to reasons I'd rather not get into. It was for the best, though. A quick side note, my past relationships had been tumultuous, but Marcus was by far the most toxic. I had 3 boys. The oldest, Ethan, was 14, my middle child, Caleb, was 9, and my youngest, Oliver, was 7. Ethan, being the oldest, had helped me wrap presents that night, trying to bring some semblance of holiday cheer to our home. That night, as we finished up, I noticed a chill in the air. The house was quiet, too quiet. It was almost as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. "Did you hear that?" Ethan asked. I glanced at him, nervous. "Hear what, honey?" Before he could answer, there was a knock at the door. It was just past midnight, and who in their right mind would knock on our door at this hour? The boys exchanged nervous glances. "Stay here," I whispered, trying to keep my voice steady. I approached the door, heart pounding, and pulled it open. No one was there. Just a whisper of cold wind, rattling the wind chime hanging beside the door. "Mom?" Oliver's voice quivered behind me. I turned, pulling the door closed and locking it tight. I didn't know who or what was out there, but whatever it wasn't supposed to be here. That was the night I learned that some things are better left unknown.